In today's video, we're counting down the top 5 deadliest mountains. And no, Everest doesn't even make the list. Viewer discretion is advised. Number 5. Manaslu. Manaslu, towering at 26,781 feet, is the 8th highest mountain on Earth. Its name means Mountain of the Spirit, but its beauty hides a deadly side. Located in western Nepal, this majestic peak is often sought out by climbers as a stepping stone before attempting Everest. For every 100 who summit the mountain successfully, there are about 9 who never return. Though considered less technical, it's the unpredictable weather and frequent avalanches that make Manaslu a real challenge. And in 2012, the mountain unleashed one of its deadliest blows. In September 2012, more than 200 climbers were scattered across Manaslu's slopes, eager to conquer the summit. The autumn climbing season had just begun, and a sense of excitement filled the air. But Manaslu had other plans. As climbers camped between the mountain's treacherous ice fields and steep cliffs, a storm began brewing. The night of September 22nd was eerily quiet, with heavy snow falling continuously. Climbers rested in their tents at Camp 3, which lay over 22,300 feet high, unaware that disaster was creeping closer. At 4:30 a.m. on September 23rd, a massive block of ice broke off from a towering serac, one of the mountain's dangerous ice formations, triggering a deadly avalanche. In the blink of an eye, a 2,000-foot wall of snow and ice came crashing down the mountain, swallowing everything in its path. Tents were ripped from the ground, climbers were tossed like rag dolls, and the icy storm turned what was once a serene base into a chaotic scene of terror. The avalanche hit Camp 3 with full force, destroying all 25 tents. Climbers who were sleeping suddenly found themselves buried alive, trapped under snow and debris. Some were thrown hundreds of feet down the slope, their bodies crushed by the sheer weight of the avalanche. The terror was unimaginable. As the survivors emerged from the snow, they began to search for their teammates, only to find lifeless bodies scattered across the mountainside. The worst part wasn't just the physical pain, but the desperate feeling of helplessness. Some climbers were trapped in their tents with no way to escape, while others dug frantically to free those who were still alive. The bitter cold gnawed at their bones, and the thin air at such high altitudes made every breath a struggle. Survivors worked together, pulling bodies from the snow and digging platforms for the helicopters that would soon come to their rescue. But for many, help arrived too late. 9 climbers were killed, and 4 others were never found. The lucky ones who survived were airlifted to safety, but the scars of that day would remain forever. It was the deadliest disaster on Manaslu in over a decade. Manaslu's serene slopes may look inviting from afar, but beneath that peaceful surface lies a ticking time bomb. Sometimes all it takes is a shift in the snow, and life on the mountain turns into a deadly fight for survival. Number 4. Kanchenjunga. Kanchenjunga, the 3rd highest mountain on Earth, stands at 28,169 feet, casting a shadow over both Nepal and India. Though its peaks are sacred to locals, the mountain's jagged cliffs and towering glaciers are less forgiving to those who dare to climb them. Known for its deadly avalanches and unpredictable weather, Kanchenjunga has claimed the lives of many who have tried to reach its summit. There are about 15 deaths for every 100 successful ascents, and in 2013, this treacherous peak reminded the world why it's one of the deadliest mountains to climb. On May 20th, 11 climbers had reached Kanchenjunga's summit, a dream come true after weeks of battling harsh conditions. Among them were Hungarian climbers Zsolt Eros and Peter Kiss, who had made it to the top, but the real challenge was yet to come: the descent. The 2 men, exhausted and weakened by the thin air at over 27,000 feet, were slowly making their way back to Camp 4, where they could finally rest. But something went wrong. Eros and Kiss lost contact with their support team, and soon radio silence filled the air. The last message sent from the climbers spoke to their struggle to move, Fatigue was setting in, and with no tents or sleeping bags to protect them, the cold began to take its toll. High up on Kanchenjunga, where the oxygen is scarce and the weather can shift in an instant, even the smallest misstep can be fatal. As hours passed with no sign of the climbers, hopes of their survival began to fade. But Eros and Kiss weren't the only ones in danger that day. Further up the mountain, Korean climber Park Nam-soo and Sherpas Furba and Vivas were hit by a sudden avalanche that swept them off the slopes without warning. Avalanches on Kanchenjunga are infamous for their sheer power and speed, and this one was no different. It tore through the upper sections of the mountain, obliterating everything in its path. The climbers had no time to react, and just like that, the mountain claimed their lives. The avalanche also blew through Camp 2, leaving a path of destruction behind, but miraculously, no one at the lower camp was killed. As rescue teams scoured the mountain in the days that followed, they found no trace of Eros or Kiss. Their bodies were never recovered, swallowed by the unforgiving ice. The bodies of Park Nam-soo, Furba, and Vivas were found buried in the snow, marking the end of a deadly season on Kanchenjunga. In just a few days, 5 climbers lost their lives on this sacred yet rugged mountain. Yet no matter how fierce the mountain, the horrors of nature sometimes pale in comparison to the terrors brought by human hands. By the way, if you are enjoying the video, please subscribe to the channel. It helps us be able to tell more stories like these. Number 3. Nanga Parbat. Nanga Parbat, known as the Killer Mountain, stands as one of the deadliest peaks in the world. Towering at 26,660 feet, its majestic slopes have claimed the lives of many mountaineers over the years. Around 21 pass away for every 100 successful ascents. Located in the remote Gilgit-Baltistan region of northern Pakistan, the mountain's steep rock faces and harsh weather make it one of the most dangerous to climb. But in 2013, Nanga Parbat's reputation for danger shifted away from nature and into something far more terrifying: human violence. On the night of July 22, 2013, a group of 16 armed men stormed the base camp where climbers from around the world had gathered, preparing for their next ascent. The peaceful camp, a place where mountaineers rested before attempting the summit, became the scene of a brutal and senseless attack. Disguised as Pakistani military scouts, the attackers infiltrated the camp unnoticed. Among the climbers at base camp was Chin Hung Liu, an American citizen of Chinese descent. He, like many others, had been asleep when shouts rang out through the camp. Startled awake, Chin opened his tent to see the barrel of a gun staring back at him. Panic erupted. Chin, driven by fear, attempted to rush his attacker, but before he could escape, a gunshot rang out, and his body fell lifeless to the ground. The other climbers, realizing the gravity of the situation, could do nothing as they were dragged from their tents one by one. The terrorists, part of the Tariq-e-Taliban group, tied them up using a single rope to secure their captives. Their leader demanded money, repeatedly shouting, "American money!" Among the hostages was Shur Khan, a Pakistani climber who desperately pleaded with the gunman, hoping his nationality might spare him. But the attackers were ruthless, dragging the climbers out of their tents into the cold night. As they worked through the camp, they came across 2 climbers from China, one of whom was their intended target, but in a dark twist, he had been killed in the initial chaos. As the night wore on, the situation grew worse. The gunman, frustrated by the botched kidnapping, began executing the climbers in cold blood. One by one, the mountaineers were forced to look toward the towering peak of Nanga Parbat, their final sight before death. Gunshots echoed through the still night air, each one sending a wave of horror through those left alive. Shere Khan, who had been untied and spared, watched in helpless silence as the gunman executed the rest of his fellow climbers. When it was over, 11 bodies lay lifeless in the moonlight. The leader of the attackers ensured there were no survivors, walking up to each body and delivering a final shot to the head. The massacre sent shockwaves around the world, particularly in the mountaineering community. This was not the usual risk of avalanches or dangerous climbs. This was an act of terror. The Pakistani government launched a manhunt for the attackers, eventually capturing all 16 men responsible. Number 2. K2. On K2, one of the world's most dangerous peaks, climbers are at the mercy of nature. And in 2008, that deadly reality struck hard. K2, often referred to as the Savage Mountain, is the second highest mountain on Earth, towering at 28,251 feet. It's notorious for its harsh conditions, steep ascent, and unpredictable weather, making it a grave challenge for even the most experienced mountaineers. The death rate on K2 is among the highest in the world, with about 1 in 4 climbers never making it back down. On August 1, 2008, 31 climbers from 8 international expeditions embarked on their final push to the summit. The air was thin and the tension high. Among them was Norwegian climber Cecilie Skog and her husband Rolf Bay, both seasoned mountaineers. As they ascended, the conditions seemed manageable, with clear skies giving hope that the summit was within reach. But K2 is unpredictable. As the climbers neared the top, the edge of a massive ice shelf known as the Serac suddenly broke off. Tons of ice came crashing down, taking with it the fixed ropes the climbers depended on for their descent. Panic spread. Ropes were gone, paths obliterated, and darkness was creeping in. Trapped in K2's notorious death zone, where oxygen is too scarce to sustain life, the climbers faced an impossible situation: descent without ropes or perish in the freezing night. Rolf Bay was one of the first victims. As Cecily watched helplessly, her husband was swept away by the avalanche, disappearing into the abyss below. Devastated but determined to survive, she continued her descent alone, guided by what she later described as Rolf's voice urging her on. As the hours ticked by, the situation worsened. Exhaustion, freezing temperatures, and lack of oxygen began to take their toll. Marco Confortola, an Italian climber, was left alone on the mountain after watching several of his companions fall to their deaths. His feet were freezing, and he knew he was suffering from frostbite, but he had no choice but to keep moving. Other climbers, including Gerald McDonnell, an Irishman, attempted to help a group of stranded climbers tangled in the remaining ropes. But McDonnell, who had just summited K2, was hit by another falling block of ice and killed instantly. As night descended, the survivors clung to life, hoping for rescue. A Dutch climber, Wilco van Rulen, managed to descend with severe frostbite, but his experience was harrowing. Lost and disoriented, he spent hours wandering in the darkness, his body shutting down from the cold. By the time rescuers arrived, 11 climbers were dead, scattered across the unforgiving slopes of K2. For the families of those who perished, the tragedy was compounded by the fact that many bodies were never recovered. There were no funerals, no goodbyes, just the cold reality of the Savage Mountain's deadly embrace. Among the dead were climbers from South Korea, Norway, France, and Nepal. Their lives claimed by one of the most dangerous mountains in the world. Cecilie Skog made it down alive, but the trauma of watching her husband swept away would haunt her forever. K2 had once again shown its savagery, but danger doesn't always come at the peak. Number 1. Annapurna. Annapurna, a name that echoes beauty for trekkers worldwide, also holds a deadly secret. Standing at 26,545 feet, it's the 10th highest mountain on Earth, nestled in the heart of Nepal's Himalayas. Though Annapurna doesn't tower like Everest or K2, it is one of the most dangerous mountains in the world. Its death rate hovers around 32%, one of the highest among 8,000-meter peaks. The breathtaking views of its circuit lure thousands each year, but the risk is always present, unseen until it's too late. In May 2012, a chilling reminder of nature's power swept through the Seti River Valley, close to the slopes of Annapurna. On that day, the normally soaring Seti River slowed to a strange, quiet trickle, and its usual milky white water turned crystal clear. Villagers along the river noticed the odd shift, but no one expected what would come next. Without warning, a wall of water and debris exploded down the valley. Entire villages vanished, forests were flattened, and 72 people lost their lives in a flood that came out of nowhere. An ice avalanche from Annapurna 4 had triggered this disaster. The avalanche created a dam of rock and ice, which had quietly trapped the river until the pressure became too much. In one terrible instant, the dam gave away, and the river surged through the valley, taking everything with it. But this was just a prelude to what Annapurna had in store. By October 2014, the Annapurna circuit was filled with trekkers, eager to experience its beauty. The 150-mile trail is one of the most famous in the world, offering stunning views of the Himalayas and a challenging but rewarding journey for those who dare. As the hikers reached Thorong Pheti, a base camp sitting at 14,600 feet, they were preparing to cross the Thorong La Pass, the highest point on the trek at over 16,000 feet. The weather was perfect, with blue skies and sunshine. But on October 14th, a powerful blizzard slammed into the Annapurna and Dhalangiri ranges. The storm buried the trail under feet of snow and unleashed a series of deadly avalanches. Trekkers who had set off early in the morning found themselves trapped in whiteout conditions. The once well-worn path disappeared beneath the storm's fury, and panic set in as hikers struggled to find their way. Visibility dropped to zero. The familiar paths, usually marked by yak footprints, were gone. Some trekkers made the desperate decision to descend without direction, unaware that they were walking straight into avalanches. The unprepared, many of them inexperienced in the ways of high-altitude trekking, had no chance. Hypothermia set in quickly as the temperatures plummeted, and one by one, they were lost in the cold. Helicopters scoured the mountains for survivors, and rescue efforts led by the Nepali army were nothing short of heroic. More than 400 people were pulled from the snow and brought to safety, but the toll was grim. 43 lives were lost in what became one of Nepal's deadliest trekking disasters. Among the dead were 21 international trekkers and numerous local guides and porters who had led them through the mountains. In the aftermath, questions lingered. Could this have been avoided? Were there warnings that went unheard? Or should the trekkers have turned back sooner? No matter how prepared, no matter how experienced, nature always has the final word. So what do you think? Would you risk climbing these to be able to say that you conquered one of the top 5 deadliest mountains? Let us know in the comments.